And just like that, we're into another live episode here on Longbox Punk. I'm Chris. I am the Longbox Punk, and I am joined on this episode by Stephen Prince. We're using the N. Stephen Prince, creator of Monster Matador. I am stoked to have you on the show. So thank you for hanging out with me, making time. I know you are a busy gentleman, so I appreciate your time a lot.
It like, I'm not busy, but it all happens to always come down at once, it's like,
Yep.
so and this was one of those days and one of those weeks where it's nonstop. So.
I mean, that's good stuff though, right? Because your
Yeah, it's
campaign
good.
is
I mean, like, people want to talk
running 10 more days to go. We'll get to Once Upon Some Monsters in Mexico. Before we get into the book and the campaign and the series and all of the Matador Kaiju stuff that you've got coming out of your brain, I would love to know a bit of your origin story. So, like, how'd you get into comics, making comics? Where did Monster Matador come from?
Yeah, I have a very sad origin story.
Okay.
I went to a religious school when I was a kid, and I guess when I was probably kindergarten, nursery, on the playground, I used to pretend I was a superhero. I used to, jump off, ledges and whatnot. And the teachers told my parents that comics were going to rot my brain.
Yeah.
And I wasn't allowed to read comics. My grandfather, I remember he would bring comics home every now and then, and I would get a glimpse, and the next day they'd be gone. But funny enough, when I was, I think, 8 or so, my dad was cool with me getting a subscription to Mad magazine.
Okay.
So
talk about rotting your brain.
and I mean, Mad is, especially, it's so subversive, and it's so educational about just how the way the world works. And it's so wonderful. And I used to make my own Mad magazines. I used to make my own comic strips. I'd give them out to my friends. As I got older and I had, a little more freedom, around the neighborhood or whatever. A friend of mine, when I was 12 or so, his dad took him to the comic store and got him a bunch of issues, and then somehow that kind of, my dad wound up taking me. It's called Bigfoot, and it was in Brooklyn on Avenue U. And I still remember, like, I remember, it was X-Men 251, which is that famous Silvestri cover, and I was hooked at that point. I think the Spider-Man issue was, I think it was one of the first Eric Larson ones.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I've basically been hooked ever since. And I've always done comic strips, cartoons, things like that. In high school and college, I used to put out zines. Because that's what we did before the internet, whatever, so yeah, I've been doing it forever. And Monster Matador, I guess, comes from a fascination with bullfighting.
Okay.
My grandfather, his family from a long time ago was Spanish originally.
Okay.
And as a kid, he gave me a Matador hat. So I've always had it, and it's always been like something on my mind in some way, whether conscious or subconscious,
Yeah.
And there's a Peter Sellers movie called The Bobo, which he plays a matador, Juan Bautista, the greatest singing matador in all of Spain. Okay. It's fun, it's funny. And one day after watching it, I was just sitting around sketching, and this was actually a long time. This was probably 2007, 2008, I think.
Okay.
The original sketch is in the trade paperback along with the date, but I'd have to look it up. And I think it was around the time of like Samurai Jack or whatever, and I was kind of just being like, oh, I'm going to create, the next whatever thing, for Cartoon Network or whatever it was on, and I just drew this Matador and then I drew Godzilla next to it, and then it was just like, oh, Monster Matador, and I was like, oh, fucking genius, that's that's my one. That's my one. That's the one I get.
Yeah.
and it was it was, and I did like I did a little mini comic of it, terribly drawn, and it was, you know, I love the Three Stooges, and that first iteration was sort of a Three Stooges style kind of slapstick. And it was basically
Okay.
the monster comes to town. The Matador and his daughter's sort of like, "Oh, Dad," you know, and the monster comes, and the monster's like, "Ah!" And the Matador is being the Matador, and the monster lifts up his legs to, you know, his leg to step on the Matador, and the Matador just like puts his sword up, and you know, the monster steps on it, and you know, he screams and he falls back, and everyone, you know, and everyone cheers the Matador.
Yeah.
And that was the original kind of idea behind it. The original concept was that it was going to be like these kind of slapsticky shorts, and I didn't really know what to do with it at the time. It's not like I knew anyone at Cartoon Network, or it's not like you just be like, "Hey guys, this is, you know, the
Yeah.
greatest idea you'll ever see." And I'm still trying to get that word out, obviously. But I'm also, I mean, I'm a big fan of a lot of things. I was having this Alejandro Jodorowsky period. I mean, like really, really getting into Jodorowsky, and I love Jodorowsky. I've been fortunate enough. I met him when I was out here in LA
That's awesome.
a few years ago, which was cool. But um, I did this. I just my girlfriend at the time, my ex, was an artist, and I wasn't drawing at the time. She would always encourage me to draw,
Mm.
so I just started drawing this one shot at Monster Matador, and it was Y el Toro de Tres Cabezas, the bull with three heads.
Okay.
And there was a villain in the book, El Esteban, who was really El Topo, but it was me, like, you know, because I thought that was just funny, which
Yeah.
probably isn't as funny to anyone else as it is to me. Um, and uh, and El Esteban would challenge the Matador because he was the greatest, you know, gunfighter and monster fighter, because his ego was so big, and the Matador was just like, whatever, I don't want to deal with you, I just want to fight the bull. So it turned in this like Mexican standoff between El Esteban and the Matador and the bull, and El Esteban, you know, shoots the bull and the bullets do nothing, you know, and then the Matador comes in with his sword and takes out the book, and it just breaks El Esteban's mind. And
That's awesome.
so that was the second sort of thing. But that also that introduced Arturo to it, and it kind of, all the elements were sort of there. And I was working in the toy industry at the time, and so around 2011 or so, 2012, I lost my job because we had got laid off, kind of went under for a number of reasons. Um, right when my show that I had developed and created was going into production, which was great.
That's good timing.
Great timing. And I just started drawing comics just to kind of keep occupied, and it really just, you know, every day. And I did a really crude web comic called Unemployant, about an ant that loses his job, you know. uh, and then I started. I did this. It's crazy. I did this like 200-page science fiction graphic novel.
Jeez.
I'm not smart. And then I was like, okay, because I was getting better at art. I was like, oh, you know what? I really want to do something with Monster Matador. And this was like 2013-ish. And, you know, I think, you know, take it for granted now. There's Kickstarter. It's easier to find artists. There's a whole like infrastructure. And, you know, it wasn't as simple back then. And my idea was that I was going to find an artist to do it. And we would do the book together, but just as an exercise, I thought it would be fun, rather than, you know, kind of writing out stuff, developing the character. I thought it'd be fun to just, because I was reading the Claremont X-Men at the time.
Okay.
And I thought it was so cool that over the first year or so, you just sort of see a lot of trial and error, and you sort of see the characters start to develop and the books start to develop, and until like really John Byrne comes in or whatever,
Yeah.
and then it really becomes like what we know and what we remember as X-Men, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that's such a cool thing about comics, and it's something I miss because now everything is like boom, it is what it is, and I really like it kind of rekindled my love, I guess, for comics, and just
Okay.
especially that aspect of it,
Yeah.
so I started drawing it, and they were really simplistic because I'm not like a great artist or anything. So I kind of drew to what I could draw, and I think for the first couple issues, or a few issues, I did like it was like a 6-panel grid. Like if you ever read those old Kirby Fantastic Four comics, they're
Yep.
basically like 6 panels a page.
Yep.
So I was kind of doing that, and I was just having so much fun, and I kept doing it. And somehow I did like 4 issues, and then I kept going because my wife got pregnant. I don't know how that happened, and very inconvenient, right? And
Right.
and I thought, okay, we'll deal with this. Then when we have the kid thing, it'll all go back to normal and everything, and I'll find someone or
Right.
whatever. I'm sorry. Can we hold on one second?
Yeah. Do what you got to do.
Okay, I apologize.
See, folks, this is the beauty of what happens when you do a live stream with somebody that's highly in demand is sometimes they have other things that come up and they need to deal with. And this is one of those times. So thanks for hanging out and joining in. If you're listening to this episode, I appreciate you listening. You have no idea what's happening, but Steven has gotten a phone call and stepped away. But we're going to kill some time because I'm really good at talking. And now let's go right back because he's back. Boom. See? Magic, man.
Beautiful. So obviously we had a kid, and I did not have the time I thought I would.
Yeah, you don't get that time back.
Yeah, you don't. So I just kept drawing. I just kept drawing. I just kept doing it, uh, and then I wound up doing like 12 issues.
You did 12
because
issues on your own?
Yeah, because we had another kid, and it was just something to do, to keep me occupied when I was.
Okay.
And then I think around like 2019 or so, it finally kind of like things kind of settled a bit, and so we wound up. That's when I kind of started focusing on doing the color series, and by that point, I really didn't want to start it over again with like because I felt like I'd already done that. So I thought we'd do like a soft reboot, which I think worked out well because it kind of gave the sense that there's like this whole world and stuff behind it, and I think it worked out well. And a couple of the artists that I originally had in mind didn't really, it didn't work out, and one of them wasn't available. One of them didn't work out, and then I was kind of not knowing what to do, and Ryland Grant, who is another writer, he did a book called Banjax with Fabio Alves, and Ryland is a friend, and I read his scripts and things like that, and he sent me Banjax, and I was kind of blown away because Ryland's scripts were really dense, and Fabio really did such a good job, and he's like, well, he's done with it. If you need someone, I can introduce you. And it was a completely different style than I'd originally kind of intended or had in mind for the book,
Yeah.
And so I thought about it, and then I was like, well, it'd be stupid to say no because it's so good. And so he did the book, and he started turning in pages, and it was like everything like you see in your head,
Yeah.
And it was just so perfect. So and that's kind of how we started. Yeah, that's kind of how we got to the color book. Yeah,
that's crazy. I mean, talk about serendipity to like the community thing comes up a lot on the show of like finding collaborators and like reaching out to friends and just talking shop, and then like, oh yeah, I know a person, like, the like I know a guy thing. is way more common than I ever would have thought it was.
Yeah.
But like, that's exactly what that was.
Yeah.
And it worked out really well because
Yeah, it did.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah. And he's, I'll be honest, it's tough because, on the one hand, you want to give people opportunities, on the
Yeah.
other hand, you also need someone who's reliable, it's hard. It's a balance because at the end of the day, too, we're indie comics. We can't afford.
Right.
And having drawn 12 issues, I kind of, I know what it is, and I think sometimes a lot of people get into it thinking like, I want to do comics, but then when you actually sit down and do comics, it's like, oh, this is actually, it's hard. It's really, really hard work, especially from an artist perspective, because you're constantly drawing
Mm-hmm.
new things, and you literally have to draw everything,
Yeah.
Um, but it's nice though to have a collaboration that we've had now for like 4 years or so, because we know each other well enough, and I can write to his strengths. I know kind of what he wants to draw, and I can kind of craft my stories around that to keep him kind of interested and excited about it. So it's worked out really well.
So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, how does that work collaboratively between the two of you, having now been working on this series and with these characters for as long as you have? Like, are your scripts really like detailed, or is it more like the Marvel process where you're like, hey, here's what I think needs to happen, and then he'll storyboard it, and then you'll be like, yeah, that, and then you fill in the dialogue? Like, how's that work for you guys?
Well, Fabio doesn't speak English. He speaks,
Okay.
which I didn't know, because he does everything through a translation thing. So we always talk
Got
on
it.
Messenger. And at some point during Tango, he was drawing stuff, and I was like, "Where is this coming from?" And I'm like, "Can we do a call?" And he's like, "Dude, I don't speak English." I was like, "Oh, okay. Oh, I don't." I'm like, "That's fine. It's not a big deal. I don't, I
Yeah.
don't speak Portuguese. It's not a big deal." But what happened is that I was more conscious about when I'm writing, because I work full script.
Okay.
It's full script, but I'm very conscious when I'm writing the full script that it's I don't want to say simplified, but it's simplified to the extent like I can't. Sometimes you're writing conversationally or with like
Yeah.
idioms or whatever, and that
Yeah.
stuff doesn't translate. So it's just being more cognizant of the language I'm using in terms of how I want things to look.
Hmm.
So I know like a lot of people on their Kickstarters, they do PDFs and scripts and things like that. I don't, because they're just not like, I mean, all the dialogue's there, um, but but they're kind of written in a very kind of like straight to the point
Yeah.
kind of style. And what I always tell them is, everything you need is in the script. But once I get the art, I do really like the real pass at dialogue and things like that, because once you start seeing how things are laid out,
Yeah.
the expressions and things like that, it changes things up a little bit, because he'll also he'll kind of add stuff here and there, or I always tell him, if I have 6 panels on a page, but you can do it in 4, go ahead and do it in 4.
Yeah.
I'm not a stickler for that kind of stuff. So so yeah. So in that case, a lot of times I'll have to adapt, and sometimes, especially when there's captions and things like that, I generally don't write them in the initial script.
Okay.
I prefer to write them with the art, because it just in terms of how those captions are laid out and the flow of them,
Yeah.
it makes it easier. So a lot of that work I do after the fact.
Okay. That's interesting. It's
Yeah,
like everybody that I've talked to has a different
it's a very, yeah,
approach to it, and the language barrier comes up quite frequently with finding like these excellent artists that might not either be like English is their native language, or like not even in the States, like they might be, you know, in a completely different continent in some cases.
Right.
So it like, I don't even understand. I struggle. I have ideas, and then turning that into a script is where I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And then like, so to even think about taking it that step further
Uh,
of like, how do I make sure that this makes sense run through a translator?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
because you know, I did like 6 years total, I think, of Spanish, and
Okay.
like the phrasing and a lot of
It's all
how
very,
this,
yeah, it's
it's
all very
all
different. Yeah.
different. And so like I can only imagine some of the barriers that have come up because of that, or you know, the getting pages back, like, wait a second, that I don't think that something
Yeah,
didn't
yeah. Yeah,
something
yeah,
was
yeah.
amiss there. But
Yeah.
I mean, reading the book, like I would have had it felt like you guys just were neighbors and you know, would
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
spend every other
Yeah.
night at each other's house, like having dinner and talking about the book and stuff. Cause it like it just it melds so well. And I love that his artwork reflects the tone, and when it's heavier,
Hmm.
it's darker, and when it's,
Yeah.
you know, but like even the colors that are used and all, like all of that stuff comes together really, really well. So let's talk about Once Upon Some Monsters in Mexico. You have the fourth issue currently running on Kickstarter through, I'm going to cheat, October 10th at 8 p.m. That's Eastern time. So next Thursday, if
Yeah.
you're watching this live. Um, so like what's the story so far for this, because this isn't the main story. Like, I like that you title each of your sub
Yeah.
arcs, to give it a unique or identifier.
Mm.
So like tell me about this arc and what's coming with this fourth issue.
Sure. So I mean, I've been doing that because I knew we were kind of going to have a longer story if we were going to, if the world didn't end. Because like I said, we launched during the pandemic,
Yeah.
and I think it makes it, and each storyline can be read on its own or as part of the whole. It's really, um, but because a lot of times people will try Once Upon Some Monsters, and then on the next one they'll come back and get volume one.
Yeah.
But volume one was really kind of like an introduction to the concept. It's just it's balls to the wall action. It's the Matador fighting monsters. Once Upon Some Monsters, it's also a lot of action. There's also a lot of monsters, but we started to get into the meat of the story.
Mm,
And in Once Upon Some Monsters, a villain from his past, sort of, who runs this cartel in Mexico, uh, comes back, and he's sort of kidnapped one of the Matador's old friends, and they fought before, so this is kind of like his revenge. And the Matador has to travel across Mexico to save them. And we introduce in our version of chupacabras in this latest issue.
cool.
And yeah, in the beginning, the first couple issues dealt with the Matador sort of facing his own fear of cockroaches and fighting the Mega Racha in Mexico City, which was a giant cockroach.
Yeah.
I hate cockroaches, and I thought, I thought it would be cathartic for me. It wasn't.
Didn't make it easier.
It didn't make it. The Matador did conquer his fear. I did not. So
That's all
yeah,
right.
it's there's a lot. We introduced monster fighting luchadors. We
Which is
really
my
This is
personal favorite.
really, yeah, this is really like the world building really kicks into high gear. We've kind of teased stuff in the past, but now you're really going to see stuff just kind of blow wide open, um, especially as the story continues.
It's great. And I
So
love that like other matadors are coming in, and
yeah,
like the mystique of like you're the matador, that you're the monster matador.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like I love that reference that everybody, when they realize like, what are we doing, boss? Like where are we going?
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah, yeah.
think it's great.
He's kind of like this. He's kind of developed this kind of legend and myth around him because he fights monsters with his cape and sword, and he's sort of inspired others, to that they could defeat the monster. So he's kind of this larger than life character. So
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm highly enjoying it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have you ever been to like a bullfight, like in
No,
person?
I was supposed to go a while back, but in Mexico, but we couldn't make it work. I mean, I've seen them on TV, on videos and things like that, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty brutal stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw like a video of one of them. And it was just I think it was more like back when like ABC or whatever used to do those exposés on
Oh
like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't believe this is real. It was
yeah,
one
yeah,
of
yeah,
those
yeah,
shows that my mom was watching, but I was like, that looks awesome.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's real. I mean, it's really, it's crazy. It's like they do it in three parts, and there's a whole, kind of ceremony to it and
Yeah.
whatnot, and they really, yeah, it gets pretty, it's pretty gnarly.
Yep, yep,
So
which, I mean, it makes sense then when he's killing, giant
right,
sandworms and all these like,
yeah,
it makes
it,
total sense that he's ready for that violence.
yeah, yeah, and with the bulls, it's you've got to hit it in that one spot, so you
Mhm.
kind of take that and extrapolate it to a monster. But if you've ever seen a bull or even a charging bull, I mean, they are huge,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And the level of, I don't know, fearlessness or just balls it takes really,
Yeah,
you know, um, to stand there in the middle of a ring in just
just
nothing,
you and the bull, yeah,
with the
major
cape.
cojones, yeah.
Yeah, with the cape and a tiny sword. It's really, so you just take that idea and extrapolate it to monsters. And I just love the visual of it. I love the
Mhm.
visual of him just kind of because Fabio draws it. He's so melodramatic. He puts all
It's
that
so good,
that
like
that
and then you do stuff like have these
oh
prints
yeah,
where, like, I love this silhouette that's created
yeah,
with the cape and then, like, launching into the open maw. And because I came prepared. So then there's also this one where he's surrounded
yeah. This is
by
Carlos Biermas.
all of the just like monster bugs that he's in the middle
Yeah,
of. And it just like the swarm aspect of that piece is just like there's so much. And it's like, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's what he's
yeah.
doing. But I love that those like prints and stuff like those get included in the
Mhm.
campaigns, because you just get to see like the because a lot of the fun of the book is this striking like full splash page of just
Right.
this little tiny figure
Yeah, yeah,
fighting this massive massive thing, and it like it every time it gets me, and every time I'm like, man, that's so good.
yeah. Yeah, it's fun. That first print you showed was, and I'd been meaning to have him do that as a variant cover. That's actually just a panel from the book,
Hmm.
and it's Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey Fabio, this is really, I'm like, hey, I'm going to do a thing of this, the Dark Knight Returns thing that you did. He goes, what do you mean? What Dark Knight Returns thing? Can you send it to me? And I'm like, I showed it to him. He's like, oh, I didn't know I did that. Okay, Frank.
Got it. Got it. All right. Yeah, because
Yeah.
there's, I mean, even going into like the variant covers,
Yeah.
that you're doing, like I I love the Wolverine like Into the Jungle where he's facing Apocalypse. That
Yeah.
this is an homage to. Um,
Yeah.
but like even stuff like that that are included is just like you've got nods to other
Hmm.
works. You've got the nods to other like really great comic artists and creators
Yeah.
that have come before. And I just like all of those little subtleties that, you know, major like casual comic fans might not pick up on.
Right.
People like me that I'm a little
Yeah.
bit
Yeah.
more than a casual fan, I'm like, man, that's the bread and butter of this
Yeah.
series.
Yeah.
Like you've got
That's
all
cool.
those nods in there and everything just really comes together so succinctly. As a fan, I just want more luchadors, but like that's
Yeah.
just because
Yeah.
I love
Well, we're
luchadors.
doing. Um, a lot of people have been asking for it. So I think it'll be March. We're gonna do a one shot
Okay.
with the luchadors. So in issue 3 of Once Upon Some Monsters, the Matador sends them on a mission
Yeah.
to gather an army, and so we're gonna follow them. It's gonna be a one shot. with them getting that army, but also fighting a monster and sort of uncovering sort of hints of where the monsters were maybe coming from.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So the kind of, and I'm hopefully down the line we'll do a spin-off like a series, but that'll be my pitch is sort of like Indiana Jones meets the X-Files meets Godzilla,
Yeah.
and that's going to be drawn by an artist, Puis Calzada.
Okay.
Who this summer he was the official artist for Metallica. He drew all their T-shirts,
That's
posters,
awesome.
things like that. So,
man,
and he's got a fun style. So,
how do you even begin to be that guy? Like, yeah, I'm the Metallica artist.
yeah, no, it's cool. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. He did a variant cover. Alex, our colorist, introduced me to him. He did a variant cover, I think, way back in 20. It was Tango the Matadors #2. He did a variant cover, and I've been wanting to work with him since. And originally, I didn't know if Fabio was going to continue the book or not. So it would have been Puis probably. But once we did the Luchadors, his style is just so perfect for it.
That's cool.
He does a lot of horror work, but his style is not like a typical horror style. It's a little more comic booky and cartoony. It's got this really kind of quirkiness to it and fun to it. So it really fits like the Luchador.
That's awesome.
The Luchador tone, yeah.
Well, I mean, I like it's not a doubt here. Like anything that you put out from this universe, I'm gonna pick up because I love this stuff. This is right in my alley. So like, are there? I know this with Once Upon Some Monsters, like you said you were really getting into the story here and developing more of the characters here. How far do you have like the story planned for this universe?
I mean, it's always evolving, I mean, there are like story beats, I guess.
Sure.
And ideas, like where I want to go. One of the things that I realized when I first did Tango the Matadors was that Kickstarters, that you're not putting these out monthly, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't really treat it like a monthly book. I try to do stories. I mean, they're big stories, right? But we try to do them in kind of like these tight bursts,
Yep.
So after Once Upon Some Monsters, there's another arc that kind of follows up from that. And that'll wrap up kind of like the first phase, I guess, if you want to call it. And after that, there's a lot of different ways we can go. It really just depends on, I guess it'll probably be around 2026, right?
Okay. Yeah.
When that happens, really just depends what the marketplace is, what, we've been looking at distribution through Diamond. I wish there were better publisher options. It's just, comics are really tough. And to be able to tell like a long form story like we are is even tougher. You see a lot of books come in for 4 issues and then they're gone because everybody's constantly, you don't really have the chance to grow. So with Matador, there's a lot of places it can go, and there's a lot of ideas I have for it. And I think as we get closer to when that next series is done, I'll probably try and figure that out a little better, just to kind of take a temperature in the room.
Yeah.
If only because even right now, those of us who do crowdfunding, it's starting to be a little tougher. It's starting to be a little tighter. A lot of that has to do with the economy. A lot of that has to do with it's just oversaturated.
Yeah.
The amount of projects is insane. It's a lot. It's become a second direct market in the sense of that it's just a ton of stuff.
Yep.
companies like Skybound, Dynamite, who are now doing big campaigns. A lot of companies are doing big campaigns. And on the one hand, it's great. It's fantastic because it does bring people into the platform. But on the other hand, a lot of them have really high buy-ins, right? So
Yeah.
like the GI Joe campaign, I know I ran during that. That was like a $400 buy-in, you know,
Yeah.
because you're going to get everything.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as a creator, and again, I have no problem with it. I know a lot of people I have no problem with it. But you do, as a creator, you have to adapt, and you have to, you doing crowdfunding and doing it, like, I guess as long as I have, this is my ninth campaign, you have to be nimble. You have to constantly keep an eye on what's going on.
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of creators. Digital is getting bigger now, and that's great. But digital also is, it makes it a slightly tougher climb,
Yeah.
to get to your goal. So, for us, our initial goal doesn't really cover much. I mean, it prints the book and whatnot. We try to raise more than that. We do cons, we do other, in order to kind of keep it going
Yeah.
and pay for it. But so yeah, it really depends. I mean, ideally, and we're gonna try this with the next one. I tried it with Afropocalypse, where we did a 64-page issue.
Yeah.
It was too big. But I think the next one we're going to combine issue 1 and 2 into 48 pages.
Okay.
I just, it's a, I can talk like about this for hours, but I just, sometimes when I think in years of like, well, if I do 4 issues, it's going to be 2020, whatever,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh man, I don't really, and we work so far in advance sometimes that I just like Once Upon Some Monsters #4. I don't like launching in October, but I've been sitting on it for like 6 months,
Yeah.
and I just need to get it out there. So, because we're already working, the Luchador one is already halfway done. So some of the money from this one goes to that, and then the money from that one, it's a whole process.
Yeah.
And so it's really just kind of wait and see. But I would love to I've got some ideas for like some kind of, like, I guess you'd say, original graphic novels. I'd love to do just like, even if it's just like one a year or something, just like a
Yeah.
nice big story. Unless something changes in the market, and but who knows?
Right.
No one
Who
knows,
knows?
and it's like I said, it's tough.
Yeah.
Kickstarter's the elephant in the room. There's the biggest. There's like 4 or 5 other ones. They're not as big, but at the same time, it's just, there's so many more options.
Yep.
We're lucky because we've been doing it since, like I said, since 2020. We've done 9 campaigns. So I think people kind of trust that they're going to get the book. They know they're going to get a story. They know they're going to, a lot of newer creators, a lot of newer books I see struggling
Mm-hmm.
a little more because it's, again, now there's a lot more competition for those dollars. When we were running campaigns during the pandemic, everyone was at home.
Yep.
So we'll see. I mean, you just kind of go with it. And
Yeah.
like I said, as a creator, you really need to pay attention to those trends and try to adapt as best you can.
Yeah. And I
So,
think too, something that's that you've tapped into that I actually was talking yesterday about was like the collaborations with other indie creators
yeah.
to like cross market. And
Mhm.
like similarly, someone else that has been on the show, Blake McCarthy, with your
Oh
Terrace
yeah, Blake.
crossover.
Yeah.
Like I saw that you two were doing the print together
Yeah.
with the Matador attacking his
Yeah.
main kaiju, and I was just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
that's such a no-brainer win because you're
Yeah.
both kind of living in the same realm. So then to be able to cross promote and like cross pollinate like that, those sorts of things are the reasons that I've backed some other campaigns because I'm like, oh, well, what is that other thing? And I was scrolling through your Twitter before this, and it was just like you're also doing the same thing on social media where you're like talking about other campaigns and trying to boost the signal to defeat the ever evil algorithm.
Yeah. I mean, the Blake is great. I think we launched maybe around the same time, or maybe he did a little after. But Territory is such a fantastic book.
Yeah.
And it just happened that we were launching at the same time. But it really is a community, and it's not a competition. Sometimes people want to look at it like, oh man, if they back that person's book, they're not going to back my book, or
right.
And maybe, but it's okay because it all comes around. But on Kickstarter especially, right, the hardest thing is to get, and again, Twitter, all that stuff, we all do it, but it's at this point it's really just noise. But we have to do it for that for that one, or whatever they might. But the hardest thing is to get someone who's not in that ecosystem into that ecosystem, right?
Yep.
So cross promotion, you're promoting with people within that are in there already, and they're already logged in. They've already got their credit card information in there. They've already done the dance. They know how it works.
Yep.
And you try to do as much cross promo because that's where you're getting a lot of backers from. That's I think a lot of creators like to think like, oh, I tweeted, everyone knows what my book is, and it's like, no, there are people constantly finding out about your book. That's why you constantly have to be doing it. And, we do digital bundles with issue ones of people's books. And, I've gotten so many backers like, oh, hey, I read this from a digital bundle from so-and-so's campaign.
Yep.
And then they'll come check it out. So it's really important because it's mutually beneficial. It's even cooler when you actually like the person, and
yeah.
But a lot of people that I back, I mean, there's so many great books out there. But my strategy of doing miniseries is also, it kind of gives people a jumping off point. But it's also like less intimidating to be like, hey, we're at issue 10, and you're just like, oh shit,
yeah,
that's a lot.
There have been some campaigns that I've looked at, and they're on like issue 13, and I'm like, I'm a completionist. I can't just pick up 13, and especially with indie stuff, like I'm more willing to buy more, especially to take a chance on stuff. But like once you get, especially once you get into double digits, if I'm introducing into that, like if this was actually like issue 11 or 12 of Monster Matador, I'd be like, that's a lot. But like, oh, it's only issue 4. Okay, like that's great. That's easy to do a catch-up tier on that.
Yeah, and it helps too because I could break out the catch-up tiers, catch up on Once Upon, and then the actual catch-up. Because if you're doing 1 through 11, you can't really break it out,
But I think the arcs are really smart.
Yeah, so like I said, I have a lot of people that will come in for Once Upon, and then they'll come back on the next one and get the rest, or they'll go to the website after the campaign or whatever, because we have monstermatador.com. So yeah, because at this point, Afropocalypse was like a double issue. So at this point, this is like issue number 9 or 10 or something like that. So
yeah. So I'm all right. I was right in there.
yeah. No, it is. No, it is. I mean, it's intimidating to be like, oh, it's a lot,
Yeah. But another thing that I love doing that I wanted to make sure I brought up was I love that you send these sketches.
Oh yeah, my little sketches.
Like I love these. And also, like, how in the heck, if I'm reading this right, are the numbers in the bottom corner the total numbers that you're doing of like backers? Because this looks like this is 67. So did you do 67 of these for one campaign?
It's something about 125 per campaign.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
that's a
and they used to be really just kind of whatever, and now I don't know what got it. I don't draw anymore. I don't have time.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like my way to just kind of keep my hand in it.
Busy. Yeah.
Busy. And I've been doing like the sketches I've been doing more just kind of like real sketches, not like nicer sketches, just because I don't know. But I kind of like, so in between campaigns, I'll usually do like 2 or 3 a day.
Okay. See,
Sometimes,
here I thought you were
usually.
like just putting on the headlamp and just pulling an all-nighter, just sketching.
No, I do. I say usually do 2 or 3. The last campaign, I think, oh man, I let it go, and then I think it was like I had like 2 weeks, because the books got printed so quick.
Yeah.
Uh, drawing, but it's I don't know. I've been doing it, and every campaign I tell myself I'm not going to do it anymore because it's time consuming, and I've been doing like more detailed sketches, but
Yeah.
people seem to like it, and it's just a nice thing. Like I don't know, we do the prints, and we always do like a print and other stuff, but most of that stuff gets thrown away, and I figure like a sketch is something a little more,
It's more personal. Like
it's more
it's
personal, it's a little more
yeah.
so I've been doing that, and people seem to like them. And they don't cost me anything, if I'm
Yeah,
being
except for
honest,
time, right?
except for time. But it really is like, I mean, if I'm being honest, like, you know, like everything costs just keep going up,
Yeah.
printing goes up, shipping goes up. I think this campaign we did shipping at $6. I kept it at 5. Um, I just and we subsidize a lot of it, but it's just
Mm.
the costs are just, so much, and it just adds up. And I figure, to me it's like, the choice is, do you want all this, like, whatever tchotchkes or whatever, or I can use the money to just, keep making, keep Fabio and Alex, and and make sure they get paid a good rate, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And I think that's a little more important, because ultimately, you're backing the campaign for the book. So we want to make that the best we can, I mean,
Yeah.
for this campaign, I hired Ladrone, who's a legend of comic artist. He started out with Cable. He draws. Now he basically draws for Jodorowsky. He did Sons of El Topo. He did Final Inkle. And he's incredible, and I'd rather put the money into that, I don't know. It's cool, but it's cool having someone at that level kind of, be like, yeah, dude, your book looks cool. I'll do a cover for you,
Yeah.
Um,
How does that work? Do you like reach out? I mean, did you reach out to him? Like, hey, you're kind of a big deal. Like, I would
yeah,
love to, like, is that how that
it is.
goes?
Yeah, I met him at Comic-Con
Okay.
10 years ago. He doesn't do a lot of public appearances, but he was signing Final Inkle.
Okay.
And we chatted for a little bit. I gave him my Monster Matador that I was drawing, and I kept in touch. And and he always said, "Oh yeah, I'll do something for you. It'll be whatever." I was like, "Yeah." And when I did Tango, I reached out to him, and I mean, he's busy, and
Yeah.
he's knee deep in deadlines, and he's like, "I can't do it right now, but I promise you one day we'll do something, and I'll get you something." And then the pandemic happened, and I just kind of, uh, you kind of lose. Everybody was kind of lost time.
Yeah.
And my friend Ted Sikora, who does he's Hero Tomorrow comics, he just did a book called Violante, and he got a Ladrone cover. I was like, what the fuck? Because I had asked Ladrone maybe a year before, like, and he was like, "Dude, I can't,"
Yeah.
But and I was like, "Damn it, you beat me to it."
Yeah.
So I reached out again, and he's like, "You know what? My deadline, I have one. I'm done in a month, and I've got about a month or two where I'm just relaxing. Uh, Email me, and we'll do it."
That's awesome.
So patience, and but part of it's just, um, building relationships, getting out there. I mean, most people, most artists you meet are super super nice, and um, but you know, it's also, you know, you have to be also respectful of their time and whatnot. I mean, a lot of them are working on really tight and heavy deadlines, and um, so yeah, it was really cool to be able to get a cover from someone like him.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, and I love that it came out of like meeting him at a convention too.
yeah.
Like that, I was stoked. One of the first guys I had on the show texted me like over the weekend. He was like, "Hey, I was at Baltimore and I was talking to the guy at the table next to me, and like we were just talking about social media and threads and whatever, and I mentioned you, and he was like, oh yeah, I've been on the show, and
yeah.
he was like, and now like he's gonna be my, like we talked about my series, and he's gonna be one of the editors and going
Oh,
forward.
nice.
And I was just like, dude, that's so rad.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love
It's
the
I mean,
just
it's you know the and I mean, we all hate doing it, right? We all like networking, and some people love doing it, but it's
yeah,
always, but it really like I wouldn't have gotten as far as I have without the support, you know, that I've had, especially from my peers, right?
yep,
Um, like we all talk, right? We
right,
all
right,
introduce. I mean, you just and it's been really cool to watch people like you know, Dave Pepos, who's writing for Marvel now. Um, Maybe 6 or 7 years ago, Ryland had put together a signing at a shop here in LA, and it was a bunch of us indie guys. And Dave at the time was doing Spencer and Locke. And that was kind of his the book that kind of put him on the map. And we shared this little tiny table, and you know, I got to know him, and you know, just it, you know, he's so good at selling his stuff. You know, it was like
mm.
a master class in just pitching. You know,
Yeah,
but it's great because and you know, you build those relationships, and those relationships build relationships, and you know, um, uh, you know, you get introduced to people. I mean, Charlie Stickney's become a good friend. A lot of people, you know, and everybody's always helping everyone out,
yeah,
because it really is. You just can't do it without. And it always bums me out on whenever I see on Twitter creator complaining that like, oh, I hate networking, or oh, I just. But that's, you know, I mean,
that's part of the gig.
it's part of the game. I mean, no one's going to know who you are unless you tell them, and if you're not willing to tell them, then they're not going to know. You
Yeah,
know, and it's not an overnight thing. You know, it's a process, right?
yep.
It's a really long process.
And it's
We
definitely
just
a skill too, like that needs to
Oh
be
yeah,
developed and fostered, because yeah,
yeah,
not everybody is as gabby as I can be. So
yeah. But like I always tell, like, you know, do a small con or something, you know,
yeah,
because once you're behind that table, it changes the perception, right? Like, okay, you're a creator now. You're, you know, and it's also great because you just work on your pitch.
yeah,
You know, like I do so many cons now. I just like my pitch is just Matador versus Kaiju. And if you're not going to stop, I mean, you're just whatever, you know, go on with your life,
right,
you know.
right.
No, but you know, but ultimately, like, you know, you kind of you just that's how you develop those skills, and you have to put yourself out there, you know,
Yep.
and you have to kind of overcome that fear or that, you know, of doing it, because anyone who's doing it, who's been successful doing that, has overcome it. And um, you know, I'm not the most extroverted person, but you know, I can turn it on at a show. You know, I can turn it on when I have to, and that's a skill. Exactly, like you say, like you have to develop that. Um, so yeah, and I mean, like I said, we just won. We were a finalist for the 2024 International Latino Book Awards for Volume One, and there's an award ceremony where we'll find out if it's gold, silver, or bronze on October 19th. So
That's awesome.
yeah, but
Well,
it's,
best of luck
you
on
know,
that.
yeah, yeah. But
That's
it's, you
super
know,
cool.
it's time, man. I mean, like I say, I came up with Monster Matador 2007. People are like, "Oh man, I just did a comic, and Marvel's not calling me or whatever." And it's like, dude, like, what do you expect? You did one comic, like it just came out, like and so much of it again is survival, right? I was talking about this with someone at Comic-Con, is a marketing person, and he was talking about so much of being successful in any creative endeavor is being able to survive. And it's being able to survive long enough for that moment when people start to recognize you, right? And like, I could have done Tango the Matadors and that's it. And, screaming at the top of my lungs, but no one would know about it, right? And part of like the success of the book is the consistency of it, is the fact that with each new one, we're introducing it to more people, and it's
it's good stuff. No, I like that a lot. I believe. Yep. Oh, do you have a favorite? Spaghetti Western?
Oh yeah, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Well, The Good. I mean, Once Upon a Time in the West is I love that film, but The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's funny you mentioned that. So that movie, that I was probably 6 years old, and I remember we're on vacation, and it came on the TV at the hotel.
Okay.
The theme song, and I was just like mesmerized.
Yep.
And I had seen over the years bits and pieces. Probably wasn't until I was like in my 20s that I actually watched the whole movie from beginning to end. But the graveyard scene, the instrumental for that, I listened to that so much for this book. I don't know what it is, but it just gets me in the mood to write Monster Matador. So yeah, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a huge, huge inspiration.
I was also imagining, so I am a huge pro wrestling fan, and I loved Lucha Underground, which was like a smaller, but they started every episode with a like salsa rock ska band playing a song, and then it would swoop down to the commentators, and then they'd go into the ring. And so like there was one episode that it was just one match that they did, and it was like everybody in the locker room, basically. It was like a Royal Rumble type of thing where like everybody gets in the ring and everybody gets thrown out and there's one winner. And it started and it was just a trumpet player and did a and it was like the slow zoom from him to reveal the rest of the like arena that it was just like it was so cool. And so I was wondering if like you listened to like the old West type like soundtracks or like showdown music, or if you would like throw on, do they play music? I would imagine they do during like an actual bullfight.
You know what? That's good. I don't think
with
so.
like as much as the ceremony, you would think that they would have some sort of something. If they don't, that's a miss.
That, but I do. I listen to a lot like Ennio Morricone.
Okay.
All that. His soundtracks are the best. The Once Upon a Time in the West one is it just gets you in the mood. Gets you in the mood for it.
Yep. That's cool. All right. So those are my official questions, but you're not done yet.
I'm not done.
I have two more things.
All right.
One is real easy, where I'm just going to take a screenshot and use that as our YouTube thumbnail. So get my keyboard shortcut here. Grab one of these. Grab this one because I like this one. All right. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. All right, cool. The other one is I like to just basically stop talking and I'll turn the floor over to you. If there's anything that you want anybody to hear or know from you, it could be about Monster Matador. It could be about why The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is the greatest Western movie of all time. The content doesn't matter so much as I just want to make sure that you have a chance to say whatever it is that you want people to hear from you.
All right. I'm just going to pitch my Kickstarter. Monster Matador, Once Upon Some Monsters in Mexico, number 1 through 4 is on Kickstarter right now. Exclusive variant cover by Ladrone. I promise you will love it. It's amazing. It's Matador versus Kaiju. What else do you need to know?
You really don't. I mean, that's
you really don't.
you really.
And if you back a physical reward, you'll get a free sketch. So
which is always a win. Obviously, like
Yeah.
I'm one of the people that's going to keep making you do these because I love
Yeah,
these.
yeah.
Well, Steven, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate your time. I look forward to seeing. I know that Kickstarter is already successful as of the date and recording of this, with 141 backers that you're going to be sketching for. So no pressure for you, but I appreciate you making time for me, hanging out, and just sharing your experience and your knowledge with me. Hang tight. I have one more logistical thing for you after I turn
Yeah, of
off the
course. Yeah.
stream. But what is a good podcast without a good tagline? And this is mine. That's going to do it for this episode, punks. Now go do what's good for you and fight some bulls. I'm kidding. Read some indie comics. We're out of here.